Halo's been a big part of my life for over a decade now. I originally got into it when I spent the night at a friend's house, and he happened to have a brand new copy of Halo Reach. We spent all night messing around in Forge, playing the campaign, and fighting for our lives in Firefight. By the end of the night, I knew that I needed an Xbox 360 so I could keep playing that game, and also try all the other games in the series. Skip forward a year later and a very happy Christmas, and I went from a Halo noob to a complete super fan. It was my new obsession, and I made sure everyone knew. Skip forward a decade later, though, and I'm far from the only fan that feels jaded from years of mistreatment. Halo Reach was the last game to be made by Halo's original creators at Bungie before being shifted off to 343 Industries, a new studio founded by Microsoft executive Bonnie Ross. Ever since then, it's been far from smooth sailing, to say the absolute least. Every disappointment, every course correction, and every attempt to bring Halo to a so-called broader audience, despite the fact that Halo was already one of the most well-known and widely celebrated franchises in gaming, all culminated in the release of Halo Infinite, a game that looked very promising before launch, harkening back in many ways to the games that made players fall in love with the series to begin with, but ultimately dropped the ball with a campaign containing yet another unsatisfying cliffhanger ending, a plethora of missing features, and skill-based matchmaking so competitive that you will have to constantly be in Ultra Instinct mode to get anywhere close to the top of the leaderboard. So, in July of last year, I made one of the longest videos I have ever done, dissecting the history of 343, the development of Halo Infinite, and analyzing the current state of the game at that point in time. To my surprise, the video actually did really well. So well that I ended up finally breaking through that ever-elusive 1K milestone that every content creator fights tooth and nail to achieve. But enough about me. Since making that video, a lot has happened. A lot has been added to the game, and a whole lot has changed behind the scenes. So with Halo Infinite Season 3 finally out, I decided to make a sequel to that video and ask one very important question. Is Halo Infinite actually good now? By July of last year, after years and years of disappointment, broken promises, and the next season at the time being slated for a September release, fans were just tired. For months, it felt like the game was just stagnating, with only a few small updates known as drop pods released ever so often just to keep up engagement. Speaking of drop pods, it naturally didn't take long for my original video to get instantly dated, because by August 9th, a drop pod released. This drop pod added our first taste of cross-core customization in the visors. Cool, I guess? Oh yeah, and they finally added the ability to look at your challenges in the pause menu, because despite there not being any match XP, you weren't able to check how you were supposed to get XP. So among some other bug fixes and tweaks, those were the only things that we really got of any note until August 25th, when another drop pod launched and gave us general bug fixes and balancing. Cool. Tensions within the fanbase continued to rise going into September, but that won't last much longer because Season 3 is releasing this month. Oh, you've gotta be kidding. This was it. This was the drop that finally broke the dam and forced fans into action. Hashtag Fire343 trended for a whole day on everyone's favorite insane asylum, Twitter, as fans had finally had enough. Not only was Season 2 now gonna last 10 months, but local couch co-op was announced to be completely scrapped. This was not only yet another broken promise, as Bonnie Ross had promised couch co-op would be a priority for the games going forward after its absence in Halo 5, but was extremely bizarre as players quickly discovered that the feature was basically completed and could even be accessed in current builds of the game through exploits. But wait, 343 released a new event this month. The Yappening, a big team battle event with a totally wacky and random battle pass with mohawks and bananas and pastels and springtime themed rabbits in September. Yeah, when fans found out that this event was nothing more than a repurposed, previously scrapped Easter event, it did not do much to quell the backlash. 343 at this point was being labeled by gamers as the worst developer in the industry, which, no. With all that 343 has done, they're still far from the worst AAA game developer. That honor goes to Volition. But seriously, it was abundantly clear at this point that the upper management either didn't care or simply didn't understand the series or even how to manage the development for this sort of game. With 3 failures over the course of 10 years, it was time for somebody to get the boot. And on September 12th, it finally happened. Bonnie Ross, founder and head of 343 Industries, left the company after 15 years of service. According to official sources, Bonnie left the company due to a family emergency. And the last thing I want to do is discredit that there was actually something going on. But the timing does seem a bit too convenient. I don't want to go full conspiracy nuts, so I'll give 343 the benefit of the doubt that this was just the perfect storm of stuff happening at once. Bonnie Ross stated that she was already planning to leave the company by the end of the year, so it's possible that a family emergency gave everyone the perfect opportunity to break ties and shake up the company's leadership. After Bonnie's departure from the company, the person to fill her place was none other than Pierre Hense. For those who don't know, Pierre Hense was the one in charge of the Master Chief Collection, a remaster collection of all 4 previous Halo games, along with the inclusion of a full remake of Halo 2. The game was released in a fairly broken state, with multiplayer matchmaking barely working half the time. But over the years, Pierre and his team went above and beyond, taking this remaster collection and turning it into a love letter to the franchise as a whole. They even naturally introduced live service elements and brand new cosmetics to unlock into the older games without tainting their original spirit. The dude has basically proven himself to be a miracle worker in the past, and that led to an uncharacteristic level of optimism coming from the Halo community, which was only enhanced by the Winter Update. The Winter Update was kind of a big deal. After a year of wait, Halo Infinite finally got Forge mode, along with match XP not linked to challenges and a custom game browser that still really only works half the time. Seriously, nothing was fixed with custom games. It still takes forever to join a game, it's still laggy, and it will still randomly disconnect you without warning. But still, it was great that we finally had this stuff, and the addition of Forge alone will be enough to keep players busy for a while. But it still needs a lot of tweaking before it's on par with previous titles. Thanks to the addition of Forge, the Winter Update also began the implementation of Forge maps into matchmaking. And man, these are a major step up from the days of Halo Reach's gray monoliths. Infinite's Forge mode is easily the most versatile we've ever seen in the series, giving players the ability to make maps and structures nearly on par with the developer-made ones. Not to mention the ability to upload and download prefabs made by other players to add into your own maps. With what's here, along with what's being planned with custom missions and complex scripting capabilities, Halo Infinite could easily become the Xbox equivalent to Dreams.
What about Project Spark?
We don't talk about Project Spark. While there was clearly more work to do both on the game and behind the scenes, things were actually looking up for 343 going into 2023. And then...
And we have breaking news at 17 past the hour. Microsoft says it is laying off at least 10,000 employees, saying that it is predicting slower revenue growth. The CEO says eligible employees will receive 60 days notice before their work ends, as well as severance, healthcare, and stock vesting for 6 months.
Well, crap. In the latter half of January 2023, Microsoft laid off 10,000 employees from their subsidiaries, including Bethesda Softworks, which is just gonna make Elder Scrolls 6 come out all that much quicker, and 343 Industries. A symptom of these layoffs was that Joseph Staten, basically the last drop of old Bungie blood that the company had, was moved from his director role and brought back to his old job within Xbox's publishing division. This also proved that I was unfortunately right in my assumption that Infinite's single-player DLC would go unfinished, as more focus was brought onto the live service element, meaning that Halo Infinite gets to join Final Fantasy 15 in the extremely exclusive club of we ran out of money for the DLC, so here's a book instead. These layoffs ended up bringing to light a lot of troubling details that were going on behind the scenes. Some sources have come out saying that there were contractors that, instead of actually working on the game, were independently developing proof of concept builds for their own Halo games in Unreal Engine. They were making fan games on company time. So I guess when you factor in productivity, the layoffs for some might have been warranted. But it's also clear that a lot of talented and passionate fans of the series also lost their dream job that day, and we can't forget that. In a statement from 343 after the layoffs, they explained that they're still there and they're not going anywhere. What is that, a threat? Seriously though, people have dissected this message to the moon and back and have come to the conclusion that going forward, 343 might take up more of a managerial position, overseeing and giving support to other Halo projects made by other studios. Kinda like what the Pokemon company does with, what does the Pokemon company oversee again? Oh, that's right, Phantasy Star Online. That being said, these are all just rumors and speculation off the basis of yet another rumor that Infinite's Battle Royale mode, referred to behind closed doors as Tatanka, or Tatanka, or I don't know, is potentially going to be a brand new standalone game rather than a new game type. To this day, I really don't know what to think of this information. I'm glad that the Battle Royale mode most likely won't take up resources from Infinite like I was worried about, and over the years I've gained a lot of faith in Certain Affinity, the company behind this potential new game. That being said, 343 becoming the Pokemon company, but for Halo, fills me with less confidence. People forget that 343 had full oversight over the Halo TV show despite it completely butchering the universe it was claiming to adapt. We all just have to hope that Pierre and any new leadership they bring in will do better at controlling and regulating the quality and content of the media released. But once again, this is all based on speculation. None of this has been confirmed to be the solid future of Halo, so we'll all just have to wait and see. In the meantime, on March 7th, Season 3 finally released as a 12 gigabyte update.
Ooh, my boy is shiny now!
So yeah, first thing I noticed is that some of the textures and lighting got a bit of a touch-up. It's small, but I do appreciate that they took the time to fine-tune some of the visuals. The Mark 7 chess piece textures still look a bit bland, but at this point, I think it's staying that way. Season 3 continues the story of Season 2, following your multiplayer Spartan helping Spartans Din and Eklund do, well, we really don't know yet. The banished AI Iratus has been pulled out of Din's head and is planning something. I guess we'll just have to find out in 3 to 6 months. This whole live service story thing is really making me miss the days of Spartan Ops. A weekly story drop with a brand new PvE mission to play through on top of it all. It was so much more satisfying than this. And now that the single-player DLC is all but officially cancelled, this is basically all the story we're gonna get for the foreseeable future. Unless you count the Halo TV show, but personally, I'd rather get a spiker to the sternum than watch more of that dumpster fire. Now, for 12 gigabytes, you would expect there to be quite a few additions to the game, and to their credit, they did add a lot. First off, Season 2 has given us yet another battle pass and 2 new armor cores. The first armor core we have is Mirage, a core inspired by the armor described in the book Ghosts of Onyx. A lot of the armor pieces look pretty cool, until you get to the helmets. Buckle up, buckaroos, we're regressing back to the Halo 5 art style. But at least it's not as bad as this season's Fracture armor core. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you the Chimera! Oh dear Didact, what have they done? I'm not gonna mince words here, this looks ridiculous. I don't care that it's not canon, I still have to look at it. These new cores give me the unmistakable feeling that there's someone on the art team who prefers the Halo 5 art style and is slowly trying to reintegrate those design philosophies back into Halo Infinite, and that terrifies me. One of the original selling points for Infinite was that it was returning to the design philosophies of those original Bungie games. So seeing them slowly regressing back into these nonsensical designs that would feel more at home in Warframe or Crysis is just really disheartening. As for the maps introduced in this season, I actually really like them. We got 2 arena maps and 1 big team battle map this time around. Chasm, Cliffhanger, and Oasis. Chasm is a symmetrical Forerunner ruin with 2 multi-level corridors on each side connected by 2 light bridges. It's clear that this map reuses a lot of assets from the campaign, but I'm not mad about that or anything. The vast majority of Reach's maps were lifted directly from that game's campaign, so I don't have any qualms with them flipping assets in this way if it means getting updates out sooner. Next up there's Cliffhanger, which I don't think is supposed to be set on Reach, but the grass textures brought me right back to 2010 regardless, and I love it. It's a pretty decently sized map with a lot of corridors and catwalks to explore and take cover in. This is the first map in the game that gives you some room to breathe. You're not constantly at risk of getting sniped from across across the map like you were on most of the launch maps. This is all I've wanted, is just a little downtime between encounters. I'm not constantly stressing about my next move, which results in me actually having fun. I'm having fun in Halo Infinite. I didn't even think that was possible. Finally, we have the new big team battle map, Oasis. As the name implies, the whole map is an oasis in the middle of the desert, with Forerunner ruins and UNSC structures peppering the landscape. The notable thing about this map is that it actually brought back classic big team battles vehicle spawns, instead of those asinine ordnance drops. Once again, it feels like they're finally learning that not everything needs to be an esport. The map's a good size with a few open areas for vehicular combat. Overall, this is the sort of map I want for big team battle. I still feel like this game's missing its Blood Gulch or Valhalla though. Just a good, balanced map with a lot of room for chaos and experimentation. I know fragmentation was supposed to be that, but it just doesn't scratch that same itch. We're also introduced to one single new game mode this season, Escalation Slayer. This feels like Last Spartan Standing, but just, well, actually good. It's another gun game style mode where you get kills to upgrade to a new loadout. But instead of being a sort of battle royale light like Last Spartan Standing was, it's instead a traditional team-based Slayer mode. I actually had a lot of fun with this game type. Even when I was getting absolutely stomped, I was grinning ear to ear playing this game mode. It felt competitive, but in a relaxed, casual sort of way, which is exactly the domain where I feel the Halo series excels in. As for additions to the sandbox, 343 has given us 2 new items. Spoilers, I'm not a huge fan of either of these. The first is a new piece of equipment known as the Shroud Screen, which drops a bubble shield looking opaque orb that obscures players' vision. It's interesting as it's one of the few equipments that doesn't really have any direct combat uses. It's pretty much purely tactical and defense focused. I can see some cool uses for it overall, it just doesn't really fit my playstyle is all. Then we have the new weapon addition to the sandbox, the Bandit. It's a DMR without a scope. It's a close-range rifle. What is the point of this thing? Why does the automatic assault rifle have a better zoom function than the semi-automatic rifle? I just don't understand why it's here. It doesn't really fit into any specific niche from what I can tell. It kind of just feels like a semi-auto version of the Commando, but with considerably less range and no scope. This thing might as well just be another pistol. It doesn't feel like a marksman rifle at all. Of all the super fun and interesting guns they could have brought back from previous games, why did they choose to add a heavily neutered version of the DMR? I just don't get it. And that's pretty much everything they added to the game in Season 3. So, since everything that's changed in my original Halo Infinite video, is Halo Infinite good now? Yes? No? Kinda? This content is, for the most part, great. This is the most fun I've had with this game pretty much since the pre-released flights, but I can't help but feel like it's far too little, far too late. If the game released in this state, then I think people would be far more forgiving, but instead it took us a whole year and then some to finally get to this point. And even then, the servers are still buggy, the menus still take forever to load, the custom games still take forever to get working, we're still missing classic game types, and now people are experiencing considerable crashes after this update, which is just inexcusable. Not to mention we still have to deal with the predatory monetization system preying on people's impulses and their fear of missing out on their favorite armor pieces. Cross-core customization is nowhere closer to being fully implemented. And at this point, especially with what we're seeing in the current storefront, I have my doubts it ever will be. There is still a massive stigma around this game in regards to the wider mainstream audience, with 343 once again being touted as the worst developers in gaming by some of the most influential content creators on the scene. This really is the Sonic 06 of the Halo series. It'll take a long time for them to live this down. And even then, their reputation will most likely never, ever fully recover. Sonic 06 released 17 years ago. Most of the people who worked on that game left Sonic Team a long time ago, but you can't bring up the company or the franchise itself without someone chiming in about that unfinished catastrophe. The tragic fact of the matter is that no matter what 343 does, the masses have already written this game off as a failure. This is still a game that released with an unfinished story, less than half half of the expected game modes, a hardline approach to competitive play which quickly scared away newcomers, and still to this day not only forces you to pay for colors, but forces you to buy them individually for each armor core. This game is taking steps in the right direction, but at this rate, it'll never be the triumphant return that this series rightfully deserved. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, then leave a like and become a Pyromaniac yourself by subscribing. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at PunishPyromon and listen to my podcast, the YTFA Podcast. And maybe join our Discord as well. We have a lot of fun on there, so don't forget to check us out. Anyway, until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.